Alright guys, welcome to day four of the 7-day video sprint. Because people seem to be liking the hand analysis, I figured I'd toss that back in today. There's some other stuff I want to talk about later, but I have limited time today, so I figured I would just throw this together quick. I took another trip to MGM yesterday, and rather than turning it into a whole vlog, since I just made my first MGM vlog, I figured I would just do some hand analysis again. So I figured I'll do probably 3 or 4 hands today, depending on how long this takes, and then do the rest of the hands on one of the later dates. I played 2-5 this time. I was on the list for 1-3 and 2-5, but it was like a Thursday. Actually, I guess it wasn't yesterday then. It was a Thursday, so it didn't take me nearly as long to get to the top of the list. There were just a few spots, and I probably got there at maybe 8 or 9 p.m., which helped as well. The first hand I want to talk about for me, sorry, I just changed my lighting here. I hope that's not super weird. All right, we're going to go with that. So this first hand here actually requires a little bit of history, because I actually watched a hand go down at this table before getting involved in anything, and it really strongly influences my thought process during the hand. So I watched this hand go down where a reg opens in early position and another reg in MP in middle position calls. The flop comes 10-10-5 with 2 spades and 1 heart. There's a C bet and a call. Turn is an offsuit 3. There's a C bet of 100 and another call. Sorry, I missed the sizing on the previous streets. And then there is on the river comes the 8 of spades, so it completes the flush. The original opener checks, and the original caller bets 305. Now, there was some weird physical stuff going on that I won't go into because I didn't know this player at all, and I couldn't really correlate it, and it doesn't actually have any bearing on the future hand, but I would have definitely geared him more toward bluffs based on what I saw. The first regular ends up calling pretty quickly with pocket queens, and he wins against ace-king off. So a little bit of an interesting hand. It definitely shows right away that the player who called, who is this young guy, he might be a pro, I guess. He's definitely willing to, first of all, call down light and empty the barrel. So it seems like he's going to be willing to put a large amount of his stack in play to try to get folds from hands that are probably not air. Like, it's pretty obvious that the original opener here is usually going to have something. Like, he's usually going to have an overpair. So trying to get him to fold that is definitely ambitious. And it definitely plays into the next hand. So in this hand, the kid who bluffed with ace-king he open limps in a straddle pot from the second middle position spot, so MP2. I make it $35 with ace-2 of clubs next to act, which is the hijack. Now, this is probably a little bit loose most of the time, but given what I just saw and the fact that this player, while he didn't show really obvious signs of tilting, I mean, it's an embarrassing spot to be in, and I expect that when he open limps here, his range is going to be a lot wider than it might ordinarily be. So I isolate. He ends up being the only caller, and the flop comes king 7-2 with 2 diamonds. He checks. I c-bet $60, and he shoves in for the rest of what he had from losing the previous hand, which is 225 more. On top of the 60. Now, we have bottom pair, and so part of what makes this hand awkward is that even his bluffs have really fantastic equity against us. Like, unless he's just shipping something like queen jack offsuit here because he thinks I don't have anything, we're never crushing his range, basically. So it's immediately, I think most people just want to fold, even if they think like, oh, he can have like a flush draw, or he shouldn't really like have sets or whatever. But so I took my time with this one, and my thought process was basically someone who's this short stacked can definitely shove a top pair type hand here. I think I've seen that before, and even from a regular who's a good thinking player, he might just chip it here on a wet board with like king, queen, king, jack, or ace, king. Now, that being said, that would only really be true if I think those are in his range pre-flop. And from someone who is shaping up to be a regular, looks like he might kind of be a pro, he's probably opening almost all of his king X hands pre. So stuff like king queen off, king jack off, even things like king 10 suited, I think it's like reasonably likely that he opens them rather than open limping. I know it's a straddle pot and I know his stack has kind of diminished, but it still seems like a kind of odd time for him to open limp something like king queen. I think he's going to look down at king queen pre and just do his normal thing and be like, great, I have a hand, maybe I'll win maybe I'll win this hand. that kind of thought process. So immediately I'm sort of discounting most king X hands that he can have. Like every single king jack plus type hand I don't think he could have. Maybe he can have like king 10 suited, maybe he can have like king 9 suited, but I don't think he's even really open limping worse than that from this position. Like, it's very unusual to see a young player who takes a sophisticated bluff line like he just did, to see them opening to see them open limping king 5 suited or something like that. So there's not much king X in his range. I did briefly think about the fact that he could have something like 8-7 offsuit and or 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited, and just like not really want to check call, not really want to fold, and so he just ships it in. I think that's a little bit discounted because even when he's short stacked, I think most players who fit his characteristics are gonna just check call, are gonna try to call me down light if they don't think I have anything, rather than check shoving. So that leads us to the last class of hands that he's likely to have, which is draws. Now the board is so disconnected that he can't really have any draws except for flush draws. Also really good that I don't have the ace of diamonds here, because it means that he can have all of the ace high flush draws, and we're actually in pretty good shape against all the ace high flush draws. I mean, we're not crushing them. Again, we don't crush really any hand that he's shoving. But more so than a hand like 9-8 of diamonds, which has backdoors, 2 overs to our pair, and a flush draw, ace like 5 of diamonds, we are doing pretty well against, because he can't hit an ace to beat us. So he just has 9 flush card outs and 3 pair outs against his likely range, which is almost no king X, maybe some 7x, which we're not drawing dead against either, and a lot of flush draw combos. So every ace X combo, and well, not every ace X combo, because he probably opens like ace 10 and above, but like ace 9, ace 8, ace 6, ace 5, ace 4, ace 3. I think all of those are reasonably likely. And then a lot of suited connector combos. Even though I think his range is technically ahead of ours, we have enough equity to call. There's a pretty solid amount in the pot at this time. It's like 120 plus 80-ish, so 200, and it's like 225 more to call, plus his 225. So it's like 225 to call and about 425-ish in the pot. So we only need to win like roughly 30 to 35% of the time, which means I think we're definitely have enough equity at this point. And, we're not going to be winning like 80% of the time, but we also can't fold. So I try to put 2 and 2 together and I call. The turn and the river are like an offsuit 8 and an offsuit 6. He turns over queen 10 of diamonds and my hand is good. So we're running pretty well. This next hand is also pretty interesting, partially because it involves the same villains yet again, and partially because we flop this gigantic hand in a spot where it's really hard to get value. So there's 3 limps to me in a straddle pot. The regular with pocket queens and the regular who bluffed with ace king and then with queen 10 of diamonds are both among the limpers. I over limp with pocket 5s. I think I'm in the cutoff in this hand. And we go 6-way to the flop. The flop is above average, 9-5 deuce, rainbow. So you pretty much can't ask for a better flop than this. Probably the only better board type would be something with some higher cards in it, like and maybe a little bit more connected, more conducive to people having like straight draws and stuff like that. Something like Jack 10-5, or maybe like Jack 7-5, but like with a flush draw, something like that. But this is pretty great. This is awesome. So the person who had queens in the first hand I talked about, he bets $35. The ace king / queen 10 guy quickly makes it 110 when it folds to him. I'm next to act, and there's like still at least one player behind, along with the original better of 35. And there's a pretty decent amount of money behind. We're all probably about $700 or $800 deep, and it's a 1K cap game at MGM. So it's a very weird spot, because if I raise, I can't really have bluffs. But by the same token, if I call, I mean, the vast majority of players here are just snap folding a weak 9. They might look down at ace 9, king 9 and think like, man, this is probably the best hand, but they're probably still folding. And it's tricky because I also don't really think that the guy who made it 110 really has anything that often. Like, he can have gut shots, but it's weird. I think I have a few options. I think I can flat and just realize that my hand is a little bit face up as at least a really strong 9, or maybe a 2-pair or set type hand. The problem is the board's so disconnected, it's really hard for me to ever represent any kind of draw. I could raise big-ish and try to look like I'm taking it down with either a 9 or maybe a straight draw, but again, I think it's really hard for people to think that I would have air in this exact spot when there's a bet and a raise already. I think the other option is to basically click it back. So, the first guy makes it 35, second guy makes it 110. That's a raise of what, $75. I mean, I could make it 185, and that basically it makes the price just a little bit worse, but also just enticing enough that somebody with some kind of gut shot or a 9 or something might decide to call. And this guy who's already shown himself to be capable of some weird bluffs might, mind you, this is a big might, he might decide to do something a little bit tricky. Now, I think I took probably the second best option. I ended up calling. I think that clicking it back is probably the best, because it just leaves the most room for something good to happen and for more money to go in the pot. Now, that might be a little bit results oriented because of what happened. I ended up calling. The person who bet 35 also called, which I wasn't really expecting and was definitely good. And we went to the turn, which was a 10 of diamonds, which also brings in a backdoor flush draw. It checks to me, which, is kind of expected because I'm actually sort of representing the strongest range by my action. By cold calling the bet and the raise, I just look stronger. Like, somebody taking an aggressive action to the 110 in this game doesn't necessarily indicate a set or, 2-pair. It can definitely be worse hand. So I think I actually represent the strongest hand. Now, by the same token, the turn brings in a lot of possibilities for the river getting kind of ugly. So I bet 170 when it's checked to me. You could argue about the sizing here. I mostly just didn't want to give a fantastic price to anybody to call, and also didn't want to bet more than 200 because I felt like that's just overkill. I know that 330 went in on the flop, but at the same time, this is a limped straddle pot. So suddenly betting like 250 on the turn, what can I possibly get called by, basically? They both ended up folding, so nothing really interesting happened after that, but I think the flop decision is pretty interesting. I don't think there's a whole lot we can do to get paid without some really interesting history against one of the players, and I think the outcome was probably about the same regardless of what I did. I guess if I had re-raised, I might have lost both players in the hand based on what they claimed to have afterward. The person who bet 35 and then called claimed to have a 9, and the other player said he just had a gut shot on the flop, which seems pretty in line with my expectations. All right, I'm going to stop it there. My battery's about to die. I'll see you guys in the next video tomorrow.